The senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I want to acknowledge and thank the senator from North Dakota. She has been a champion for the Native people, our indigenous peoples around the country, including in my state of Alaska, whether it's working to address the issues related to childhood trauma that so many of our young Native children face, or the issues relating to domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, the real scourges that we see directed, unfortunately, at so many of our Native women in the state of Alaska, in the state of North Dakota, around the country. She has recited the statistics. I think sometimes we just get numb by the statistics. When you are told that you're 4 times the national average, sounds bad, but what does that mean? And when you put face to it, when you hear the tragedy repeated through the stories, these are not just statistics that we are speaking of. These are real women. These are our sisters. These are our neighbors. These are our friends, and these are human beings who deserve to be respected in their lives, but also respected in often tragic deaths. And how we work to address these difficult issues, I think, needs to be a focus and a priority for us. So I appreciate what the senator from North Dakota is doing in bringing attention to our nation's lackluster, and that's kind of a polite term here, but a lackluster response to the tragedy of missing and murdered Native women and girls. And I'm proud to lend my voice to the proposition that Congress, in the exercise of our trust responsibility to our Native people, that we have a responsibility to do more. You would think that trust responsibility demands us to be paying even closer attention, and yet it seems that we just withdraw from that responsibility is not acknowledged. Now, it's not often here in the United States that we benchmark our treatment of Indigenous peoples against Canada. But in this case, there's actually a compelling difference between Canada's national response to the tragedy of missing and murdered Native women and our seeming indifference here in the United States. Down in southeastern Alaska, right across on the Canadian side, lies the town of Prince Rupert. This is in British Columbia. The Alaska State Ferry comes up from Washington State, stops in Prince Rupert, and then moves on into Alaska. Prince Rupert is also the terminus of Highway 16. And the locals refer to Highway 16 as the Highway of Tears. They refer to it as the Highway of Tears because it is a road on which women and girls, Native women and girls, have vanished for decades now. So the question, how many? Who's disappearing? Some would say as few as 12, perhaps as many as 43. CBS News devoted a segment of its news magazine show, 48 Hours, to the Highway of Tears. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau committed $54 million Canadian dollars to a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I'll admit, there is some controversy over whether the national inquiry is actually fulfilling its mission. But my point here is to note that Canada stepped up. They acknowledged that this is an issue, this is a problem, and have responded to the disproportionate victimization of Native women and girls, and they've done so in a tangible way. And here in the United States, as my friend and colleague has noted, we are more than a bit late in acknowledging that the problem even exists. Now, earlier this year, the senators from Montana, both Senator Daines, Senator Tester, were successful in designating May 5th, 2017 as a National Day of Awareness on Missing and Murdered Native Women and Girls. And the resolution recites that some tribal communities face murder rates that are 10 times the national average, as Senator Heitkamp has noted, that according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that homicide was the third leading cause of death among Native women between the ages of 10 and 24 years of age, and the fifth leading cause of death for Alaska Native women between 25 and 34 years of age. So we're trying to raise the attention, the awareness. We're trying to shine a spotlight. I certainly think that it's high time that federal law enforcement answer the question, why? Why is the murder rate for Native women so high? Why are we not addressing it in a comprehensive fashion? And the Senator of North Dakota has pointed out that in many areas, jurisdictional issues are at play. And I agree. That's not an excuse. We acknowledge that we have challenges with jurisdictions. Let's figure this out. Women are disappearing and dying. In Alaska, it's not so much jurisdictional issues. It is the fact that in far too many of our communities, we lack any law enforcement presence. We might have a VPSO, a village safety police officer, but they're not armed. They're very limited in terms of their ability to provide for levels of enforcement. And more frustrating than so much of that is women who have been victimized feel like reporting doesn't get them anywhere because there's no follow-through, there's no prosecution, there has been no effort that will allow them to have any level of recourse, much less justice visited upon them. But I think as we talk about these issues of jurisdiction and law enforcement and the rates that we see, I think we need to be clear that the discussion today, the call for justice, is not driven by statistics and rates. It's driven by the faces. It's driven by the loss of people's daughters, people's siblings, people's friends. Savannah and Stella and Nicole and Mona Lisa, these are all real people, real women with names, with faces, with families. In Alaska, the face that we so often associate with the lack of progress when it comes to addressing the issue of missing and murdered Native women is the face of Sophie Sergi. And this year marks the 24th anniversary of the death of Sophie Sergi from Pitka's Point. This is a Yupik village in southwest Alaska. And on August 26th of 1993, Sophie was found dead in the women's bathroom dorm on the University of Alaska Fairbanks campus. She was raped, she was shot dead. It's believed that her body remained in that bathroom for some 13 hours before it was found. The murder weapon was never recovered, and that case is still a cold case 24 years later. But we don't forget Sergi. We don't forget Sophie Sergi, just as we don't forget the women that the senator from North Dakota has shared story with. We cannot forget these women. Now, unlike the tragedies along the highway of tears, we really don't know. We really don't know how many Native women and girls have gone missing and murdered. And that's a big part of the problem. But I will tell you that if you ask advocates for Native women, the answer comes back at all. It's no secret. We all know somebody. We all know somebody who has gone missing, somebody who has been murdered. That was the testimony of Tammy Giroux. She is the executive director for the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, and she testified before a congressional briefing last February. And Tammy told the briefing that her organization has documented as many as 50 names of women. And when you think about it, numbers on that order were significant enough for Prime Minister Trudeau to commission a national inquiry. So it causes us to ask the question, what about us? What number do we have to get to before there is a call to action, before we wake up and say, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable that our Native women are disappearing, are being murdered. Native women are asking why federal law enforcement has no protocol for addressing the crisis in our Indian country, why there is a lack of coordination among criminal justice agencies in this country to set aside the jurisdictional challenges and investigate these tragedies in an effective manner, and why the lack of victim services. Again, we had a hearing on human trafficking, sex trafficking in the Indian Affairs Committee, and it was pretty revealing about the lack of victim services, specific, that could be there to help our Native victims. The families of missing and murdered Native women right now in Alaska have to cover the cost of a traditional burial. They have to cover the cost of immediate and long-term counseling, so many other expenses that they can't afford. We maintain a victims of crime funds here in this country to address these sort of costs, but there is no dedicated tribal funding stream. We've had some pretty bipartisan efforts here in the Senate to establish one, but we haven't even been able to do that bare minimum to provide for the victims. Mr. President, the issue we are discussing today, it's tragic, it is frustrating, it is depressing, but to remain silent is to truly marginalize, further marginalize Native women and girls, and that is unacceptable. Perhaps we're not going to devote tens of millions of dollars to a national inquiry, but it is high time that we acknowledge a problem that has failed to make headlines in this country, because you first have to acknowledge that a problem exists to make headway in addressing that problem. So again, I thank the senator from North Dakota for her strong and steadfast advocacy on behalf of not only our Native women, but our Native children, our Indigenous peoples across this country. I appreciate all that is being done, and I look forward to working with her again as we try to shine a brighter light on a very tragic situation.